People expect lawyers like me to be cold, calculating, detached. But the truth is, when you spend your days knee-deep in divorce papers, custody battles, and broken promises, you become painfully aware of how fragile relationships really are. That's probably why the irony of my own story stings so sharply. I thought I'd built something lasting. I was engaged once to Kenneth. We were together for 5 years, engaged for 1. I believed I knew him down to the bones of his soul. I believed we were solid safe. But one thing about betrayal is it never knocks politely. It breaks down the door in the middle of the night and leaves your life in ruins. For me, the ruin came in the form of a woman named Donatella Rossi, an investment banker, with the kind of wealth that shines like armor. She drove imported cars, wore tailored suits worth more than my monthly rent, and carried herself like the world bent in her favor. Kenneth met her at a financial conference. He swore she was just a professional connection, just a friend. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But lies have a way of slipping through even the most careful mouths. One evening, I was working late, drafting motions in my home office. Our shared Apple ID kept syncing notifications to my iPad. I didn't think much of it until I saw Kenneth's texts flash across the screen, messages he thought were private. "You're my soulmate. We were meant to be together. I can't wait until it's just us." My blood ran cold. I scrolled through praying I'd misread, that it was some out-of-context joke. But no, the more I read, the clearer it became. My fiancé wasn't mine anymore. The breakup was swift and merciless. I confronted him, and Kenneth didn't even bother to deny it. He admitted that Donatella made him feel alive again, that she understood him in ways I never could. His words were sharp, meant to cut, and they did. I packed my things, moved out of our condo, and told myself I was handling it like an adult. I told myself I was strong. I even told him to keep the ring. I didn't want its weight on my finger or the memory it carried. But late at night, lying awake in my tiny rented apartment, I felt the ache of betrayal hollow me out. I'd loved him. I'd built a future with him in my head. And in 2 weeks, he discarded it all. 2 weeks. That's all it took for Kenneth to appear on social media beaming beside Donatella in glamorous photos. Their captions were nauseating. "Finally found my true happiness. So grateful for real love." Within a month, they were official. Within 3 months, engaged, and the world believed their fairy tale. Friends I'd known for years began whispering that I was bitter, that I couldn't handle seeing him happy. Donatella posted barbed captions. "When you upgrade from a Honda to a Ferrari, you never look back." For context, I drive a Honda Accord. Reliable, humble, paid off. I read that caption and my hands trembled. The cruelty wasn't subtle. It was aimed squarely at me. It only got worse. Kenneth and Donatella showed up to my nephew's birthday party. My sister had invited them months earlier, back when Kenneth and I were still together, and she felt too awkward to uninvite them. I'll never forget that day. Donatella paraded Kenneth around the party like a trophy, and then in front of my entire family, they announced their engagement. She clasped his hand, lifted it in the air, and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I hope Shannon can be happy for us someday." I know it must be hard for her. Every pair of eyes turned to me. I smiled. God, I forced a smile, while inside I was unraveling. My sister later whispered that Donatella had spent the whole party spreading lies, telling people I'd been texting Kenneth constantly, that I was obsessed, that I was unstable. None of it was true, but truth didn't matter. Perception did. And in that room, I was cast as the bitter, jealous ex who couldn't move on. I left that night with my dignity barely intact. And yet something had shifted inside me, because unlike Donatella, unlike Kenneth, I had one advantage. I knew how to dig. I knew how to uncover things people tried desperately to hide. Call it professional instinct. Call it a wounded heart searching for justice. But the lawyer in me couldn't resist pulling a single thread. I ran a background check on Donatella. It didn't take long. Within minutes, I had the truth staring back at me in black and white. Donatella wasn't single. She wasn't divorced. She was married, had been for 6 years. Her husband's name was Amir, and they had 2 children together, a family in the suburbs. My first thought, shock. My second, a dark, bitter laugh. Kenneth had left me for a woman living a double life, a woman whose happily ever after was already claimed. And suddenly, for the first time since losing him, I felt something new blooming inside me. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't grief. It was resolve. If they wanted to paint me as the villain of this story, then so be it. But I wasn't going to let them get away with rewriting the truth. Not this time. Once I knew the truth, I thought about what to do with it. Do I stay silent? Let Kenneth dig his own grave, or do I expose everything? Drag them both into the light. For a week, I said nothing. But silence doesn't protect you when someone else is writing the story. Donatella began her campaign. It started with social media subtle at first, so grateful to have found a real man who knows my worth. She knew people would connect the dots, that I would see it, that everyone who knew Kenneth and me would see it. Then came the digs. When you upgrade from a Honda to a Ferrari. She didn't tag me. She didn't need to. My friends sent me screenshots followed by awkward pitying texts. Don't look at her post, Shannon. She's just being petty. But they did look. Everyone did. And whispers grew louder. Shannon's not over him. She must be jealous. I tried to ignore it, tried to bury myself in work. But the humiliation followed me everywhere. It clung to me like smoke. The breaking point came at my nephew's birthday party. I hadn't wanted to go, but my sister begged me. Don't let them scare you out of your own family gathering, she said. You deserve to be there as much as anyone. She was right, or at least I wanted her to be. When I walked in, balloons and laughter filled the room. For one brief second, I felt normal again, like I belonged. Then I saw them. Kenneth and Donatella walked in late, hand in hand, dressed as though they were attending a gala rather than a child's birthday party. Donatella wore a crisp white suit that screamed, "Look at me!" Bossy, Pimsy, Is. And oh, everyone did. She greeted relatives she'd never met like long-lost friends, hugging them, laughing too loudly. And Kenneth walked around with that smug little smile that once charmed me. Now it made my skin crawl. The cruelest part. My sister had invited them months ago back when Kenneth and I were still engaged. She told me later she didn't know how to uninvite them without causing drama. Drama found us anyway. Halfway through the party, while the kids were playing games in the backyard, Donatella clinked a champagne glass to get everyone's attention. Family, she said with a dazzling smile. We have wonderful news. Kenneth and I are engaged. Gasps applause. My stomach twisted. Kenneth slipped his arm around her waist and said, We couldn't wait to share our happiness with you all. And then Donatella turned her eyes directly to me. Her smile sharpened. Her voice dripped with mock sympathy. I truly hope Shannon can be happy for us someday. I know it must be difficult. It was a dagger, and she twisted it in front of everyone. I forced a smile. My lips trembled, but I held it. I even clapped softly, though my hands shook. I wasn't about to let them see me break. But the whispers started immediately, guests leaning into each other. Glances darted at me like arrows. My cheeks burned with the weight of their pity. Later, my sister pulled me aside. Her face was tight with guilt. Shannon, I'm so sorry. Donatella's been telling people you've been well texting Kenneth, that you're struggling, that you might not be in a good place. My heart dropped. What? She's making it sound like you're obsessed. That you can't let go. I couldn't even form words, because that was her plan all along. To paint me as the bitter, unstable ex, to frame herself as the shining, patient fiancé who rose above my supposed obsession. Kenneth played his part perfectly. He stood beside her, shaking my relative's hands, smiling with false magnanimity. When he finally came up to me, he clasped my hand in both of his and said condescendingly, No hard feelings, right? I wanted to rip my hand away to scream at him. Instead, I looked him straight in the eyes and said quietly, None at all. But inside I was done. If they wanted to turn this into a game, then fine, I'd play. And I had a secret weapon they couldn't fathom. I wasn't some scorned woman lashing out. I was Shannon Whitfield, family law attorney. And while Donatella and Kenneth paraded around in their fantasy, I was quietly holding a truth sharp enough to cut their world apart. The truth that Donatella was already married. As I drove home that night, the humiliation from the party burned in my chest. But beneath it, something steadier grew. A plan. They thought they were untouchable. But no one gets away with rewriting the truth forever. The night of the birthday party, I couldn't sleep. I replayed every smirk, every whispered comment, every smug glance Kenneth and Donatella had thrown at me. Humiliation still clawed at my chest, but beneath it was something stronger. Something cold and precise. Resolve. I had the truth sitting in my hands. Donatella wasn't some fairy tale queen who swept Kenneth off his feet. She was a fraud. A married woman building a second life on lies. The question was, what would I do with it? I stared at my laptop screen long past midnight, the glow painting my apartment in pale blue light. I opened Donatella's background file again, scrolling through the marriage records. Married for 6 years. Husband Amir Rossi, 2 children, suburban home, not even 30 minutes from the city. I leaned back in my chair, my heart racing. Amir, the man Kenneth didn't even know existed. I could have ignored it, pretended it wasn't my problem. But the image of Donatella standing in my sister's living room announcing her engagement like royalty, mocking me with every word, it wouldn't leave my mind. So I wrote a message, not emotional, not vindictive, just professional. I found Amir's LinkedIn profile and typed, "Hello, Mr. Rossi. I am a family law attorney. I have information regarding your wife that I believe you should know. Please let me know if you'd be open to meeting. This is not a solicitation. It is personal." My finger hovered before hitting send. My throat was tight. What if I was wrong? What if Amir knew everything and laughed in my face? What if I looked like the bitter ex Donatella was painting me to be? But then I remembered Kenneth's smug voice. No hard feelings, right? Click sent. 3 days later, Amir and I sat across from each other in a quiet corner of a Starbucks. He was nothing like I imagined. Soft-spoken with tired eyes, but a steady kind of strength in his posture. He wore no mask, no smug grin, just exhaustion, and something deeper, betrayal, simmering under the surface. "I knew something was wrong," he said after I showed him the evidence. His voice didn't crack. It was almost too calm. "She's been distant. Business trips that didn't add up, but I never thought." He broke off, pressing his fist to his mouth. For a moment, I thought he'd crumble, but then he straightened. His jaw set. "Do you have proof I slid my phone across the table?" Donatella's engagement posts, the venue booking she'd tagged on Instagram, the photos of her beaming with Kenneth, ring flashing. Amir studied them in silence. When he finally spoke, it was with terrifying calm. "I'll need a lawyer," he said. "And it sounds like you already are one." Something flickered between us, then an unspoken agreement. He wasn't going to let her destroy him quietly. Neither was I. Professionally, I knew the next steps. I could represent Amir in divorce proceedings. Another colleague of mine could take the criminal side because bigamy isn't just scandal. It's a felony. 5 years depending on the state. But personally, it felt like justice, not revenge, not pettiness justice. Because while Donatella smeared my name, whispered that I was unstable and jealous, she was building her happily ever after on a crime. And I was the only one who knew. A week later, an invitation arrived in my mailbox. Embossed, elegant, expensive. "Kenneth and Donatella request the honor of your presence at their wedding." At first I laughed. Then I saw the handwritten note inside. "Hope you can make it, unless it's too hard for you." My laughter turned bitter. She wanted me there front row to watch her crowning moment. She wanted my humiliation complete. I pinned the invitation to my fridge, a reminder not of what I'd lost, but of what was about to collapse. Because by the time that wedding day arrived, I knew the stage wouldn't be hers. It would be mine. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a spectacle. Donatella paraded Kenneth across social media like a crown jewel. Champagne toasts, shopping sprees, endless hashtags about true love conquering all. But behind the filtered photos, reality was crumbling. Amir filed for divorce quietly, methodically, with me at his side as counsel. We froze joint accounts, secured property records, and locked down assets Donatella thought were untouchable. The Maserati she flaunted, leased under a company Amir co-owned. The designer suits Kenneth pined in bought with joint credit cards. Their luxury life was nothing but borrowed shine, propped up by a marriage Donatella pretended no longer existed. When Amir moved forward, the state did too. A colleague of mine, criminal law, filed charges of bigamy and document fraud. Donatella had checked the box single on her marriage license application with Kenneth. That wasn't just deceit, it was a crime. The arrest came on a Thursday morning. Donatella was leaving a bridal boutique veil draped over her arm when officers intercepted her. Cameras caught it. Her face, shocked then furious, was plastered across local news by evening. Kenneth was by her side when she was led into custody. He shouted at the officers, tried to pull her away, until one of them warned him he'd be charged with obstruction. I watched the footage on my laptop alone in my apartment coffee cup, trembling in my hand. For the first time in months, I exhaled, not in joy, not in triumph, in relief. Because the truth wasn't just mine anymore. It was out. But if I thought exposure would silence them, I was wrong. The very next day, my office phone rang again and again. 73 calls in one afternoon, all from Kenneth. I didn't answer once. When I finally listened to the voicemail, his voice was venom. "You vindictive witch. You did this. You couldn't handle seeing us happy, so you made up lies. Well, guess what? We're suing you. Defamation harassment, your career's over. Laugh it up while you can. I deleted the message and called security because the following morning, Kenneth stormed into my firm's lobby. He shouted about conspiracies, about forged evidence, about how I had hired an actor to pretend to be Amir. My receptionist called building security. They escorted him out while clients in the waiting area stared. The footage became evidence, and still it didn't stop. He and Donatella began a smear campaign, fake reviews on legal forums, posts online calling me an unethical lawyer who sabotaged her ex's relationships. Donatella, even from jail, was dictating captions to her friends. These jealous women are ruining my life. My fiancé and I will rise above this storm together. It was surreal, like watching people drown in quicksand while insisting they were floating. Then came the most audacious move yet. Donatella, out on bail, threw a freedom party for Kenneth. Photos of them popping champagne filled Instagram. Can't keep a good man down, ready to sue everyone who tried to destroy us. It would have been laughable if it wasn't so reckless, because the very next day she messaged Amir directly. I know you're hurting from the divorce, but lying about Donatella won't get him back. Amir forwarded the message to me. His reply had been curt, razor sharp. What divorce? We're still married, that's the problem. Donatella snapped back. Nice try. Kenneth showed me the papers. Amir answered. Those would be public record. File number, please. She never provided one. Instead, she spiraled into insults. You're pathetic, using your kids to trap a man who doesn't love you. That last line, proof of harassment, was sealed in black and white. The cracks spread quickly. Their perfect love began to look like a farce under courtroom lights. Reporters picked up every contradiction, every slip. Friends who once whispered about me being jealous now sent messages of apology, though none of them admitted how quickly they'd believed the lies. But apologies weren't what I wanted. What I wanted was justice, and the courtroom was waiting. The day of the preliminary hearing, the courthouse buzzed with the low hum of curiosity. Reporters clustered by the steps, cameras angled toward the doors. I slipped in quietly, legal pad in hand, heart steady. This wasn't my trial. I was only there as counsel for Amir, and possibly as a witness. Still, it felt like my life. My choices were on display alongside theirs. When Kenneth and Donatella arrived, heads turned. She wore a tailored white pantsuit, her hair perfectly coiled, as if she were walking a runway instead of stepping into criminal court. Kenneth held her hand tightly, his jaw clenched, eyes darting around like a cornered animal. They still believed this was their stage. Inside the courtroom, the judge was brisk, no nonsense. The prosecutor laid out the case with the precision of a scalpel. Marriage certificate between Donatella and Amir dated 6 years ago. No record of divorce. Application for a marriage license with Kenneth box single checked. Financial records showing support of 2 households' bank transfers, joint accounts. The evidence was irrefutable. Kenneth shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Donatella, however, sat tall, her chin tilted as though none of it applied to her. When it was my turn to testify, I stood calm, professional. I recounted the facts. How I'd discovered Donatella's marriage. How I'd informed Amir the timeline of events. My tone was measured, clinical. No spite, no flourish. But I could feel Donatella's eyes burning into me. Every word I spoke, she mouthed liar under her breath, until the judge snapped, Ms. Razi, one more outburst and you'll be held in contempt. She sat back, arms crossed, a sulking child in designer heels. Kenneth's attorney tried to spin it. Isn't it true, Ms. Whitfield, that you were devastated when Kenneth ended your engagement? I was hurt, I admitted, but devastated, no. I moved on. And yet, you investigated his new partner. I did a basic public records search, I said evenly. It took 5 minutes. The marriage license was the third result on Google. A ripple of laughter broke out in the gallery. The attorney's lips pressed into a thin line. Then came Amir's testimony. Quiet, resolute, devastating. He brought photos of their wedding, their children's tax returns, filed jointly mortgage documents. The evidence stacked higher than Kenneth's excuses. But it was Donatella's turn that set the courtroom ablaze. She took the stand with a show of trembling vulnerability, tears shimmering as if on cue. Were you aware you were marrying a man already wed? The prosecutor asked. No, she said firmly. Kenneth told me he was divorced. This is all a setup. Did you ever ask to see divorce papers? I trusted him. That's what love is. Not everyone is a paranoid lawyer like her. She gestured toward me, venom dripping from the word lawyer. The prosecutor pressed, showing screenshots of her own emails. So glad you're finally free from that woman. Who is that woman? His ex-wife Donatella snapped. She's lying. She's obsessed. The judge's brow furrowed. The breaking point came when the prosecutor asked a simple question. If you truly believed Kenneth was divorced, Ms. Rossi, can you explain why he never spent a single night at your apartment? Donatella's smile faltered. He's traditional. He wanted to wait until marriage. The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. And yet your Instagram shows you two in hotel rooms together. That's different. How? Because her voice cracked. Then, in a slip of fury, she shouted, because he had to go home to his kids. Gasps rippled through the room. Even Kenneth's lawyer buried his face in his hands. The prosecutor's voice was calm. So you admit you knew he was still living with his wife? I didn't mean it like that, Donatella stammered. He said she was. The unraveling was complete. Outside reporters swarmed. Donatella shoved past them, muttering about conspiracies about jealous exes fabricating documents. Cameras captured every word, every wild denial. Kenneth walked beside her, pale and silent, his eyes hollow. Inside, the judge set the trial date. Donatella, bound over for trial. Conditions GPS, monitoring no contact with Kenneth to prevent further fraud. It was a victory, but not the end. Not yet. Because the trial, the real show was still to come, and I had front row seats. Trials have a rhythm. Evidence testimony. Cross-examination, closing arguments. You'd think the weight of the law would sober anyone. But for Kenneth and Donatella, it only seemed to unhinge them further. The courtroom was packed on the first day. Reporters, curious locals, even some of Kenneth's old colleagues who came for the spectacle. I sat behind Amir, my client, my ally. My presence wasn't required every day, but I needed to be there for him, for me. The prosecution's case was simple, straightforward, clean. Donatella had entered into an engagement and attempted marriage while still legally wed. She had filed fraudulent paperwork to obtain a marriage license. Kenneth had supported her in the deception, benefiting from her financial web. The defense chaos. Donatella's lawyer tried to claim she believed she was spiritually divorced. The courtroom murmured in disbelief. Kenneth's attorney went further, arguing I had masterminded the entire case as revenge for a broken engagement. The prosecutor cut that argument to pieces. If discovering a marriage license on Google is a conspiracy, then the entire internet is part of it. Even the judge chuckled when Amir testified. His calm dignity silenced the room. Photos of family vacations, tax returns, signed jointly, recordings of late-night phone calls, where Donatella told him she was working late. The evidence was unshakable. Then I took the stand again. Professional, precise, I laid out the timeline of my discovery, how I contacted Amir, the steps that followed. Kenneth's lawyer tried to rattle me. You still loved Kenneth, didn't you? I met his eyes steady. No, what I felt was betrayal. And when I discovered fraud, what I felt was duty. There was no clever retort, just silence. But the unforgettable moment came when Donatella testified. She wore white again, as if she thought the color itself could declare her innocence. Her opening tears seemed rehearsed, her quivering voice carefully pitched for sympathy. I'm the real victim, she said. These jealous people are conspiring against me. I found true love, and now they're destroying it. The judge warned her twice to answer only what was asked. She ignored it, spinning into rants about me, about Amir, about a rigged system. The prosecutor let her talk. Every word dug her hole deeper. Then came the fatal slip. The prosecutor asked if Kenneth was truly free to marry. Why did he continue living at his wife's address? Her mouth tightened. He was only there for the children. So you admit you knew he was still living with his wife? I know, he told me. Her voice cracked. The gallery erupted in whispers. The judge's gavel slammed, but the damage was done. Closing arguments were brief. The prosecutor compared Donatella's logic to shoplifting by her reasoning intending to pay someday means you can walk out with the groceries today. That isn't how the law works, and that isn't how marriage works. The jury deliberated less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts, bigamy, document fraud. The sentence wasn't prison. The judge gave her 2 years, suspended 3 years probation, $50,000 in fines and restitution to Amir for funds misused during the marriage. It was enough, more than enough, because the real punishment wasn't in the numbers, it was in the spectacle. Donatella, the glamorous, untouchable woman who mocked me as jealous, was now branded a fraud, a liar. Her empire of champagne posts and smug captions reduced to a cautionary headline. Kenneth stood in silence as the verdict was read, pale deflated. When Donatella screamed that it was all my fault that I had destroyed her happiness, he didn't defend her. He didn't even look at her. He just stared down at his hands, as if finally realizing the weight of what he'd chosen. In the days that followed, the fallout spread like wildfire. Donatella's career collapsed. Clients vanished. Partners severed ties. Kenneth, tainted by association, lost his job within a week. He tried to sue me, claimed intentional infliction of emotional distress and interference with prospective economic advantage. His lawyer was desperate enough to file it, but discovery cut that case to ribbons. Texts surfaced where Donatella admitted to friends she knew she was still married. Emails where Kenneth bragged about how her money would set him up for life. Evidence of reckless spending on a wedding that would never be legal. The case was dismissed with prejudice. It could never be refiled. Amir won the divorce. He gained custody of the children, ownership of the house, and the security he deserved. He sent me a handwritten note afterward. "Thank you for standing with me when the truth felt too heavy to hold alone. My children and I are free because of your resolve." I kept that note not as proof of victory, but as a reminder that justice is not abstract. It's human, it matters, and me, for the first time in months, I felt the air in my lungs lighten. I wasn't jealous. I wasn't broken. I wasn't bitter. I was free. But the story wasn't done because fate had one last twist to hand me. After the trial, life didn't snap back to normal overnight. For a while, every time my phone buzzed, I half expected another smear, another accusation, another desperate attempt from Kenneth or Donatella to claw their way back into relevance. But silence came instead. A heavy silence filled with echoes of their collapse. Donatella's name became tabloid fodder. Socialite, convicted of bigamy, splashed across headlines that once praised her glittering career. She tried to rebrand herself online, even launched a podcast about surviving jealous exes. It lasted one episode. The comments shredded her. Kenneth drifted in the wreckage of her downfall. He lost his job, his reputation, and most of his friends. I heard through the grapevine he was back living with his parents. Sometimes I imagined him scrolling through my LinkedIn at night, wondering how everything slipped through his fingers. But I didn't think about him often. He wasn't my burden anymore. One evening, months after the verdict, I attended a legal conference out of state. Panel seminars, the endless shuffle of lawyers trading cards. It should have been routine. But then I met Daniel Harper. He wasn't flashy. He didn't drive a Maserati or wear suits that screamed for attention. He was steady, thoughtful, the kind of man who asked questions and listened to the answers. We ended up talking until the hotel staff politely asked us to clear the lobby. For the first time in a long time, I laughed without the bitterness lurking beneath. Weeks later, he took me to dinner. Months later, he met my family. For once, no games, no hidden lives, just something honest, something real. When we announced our engagement on social media, the comments flooded in warm, supportive, genuine. But buried among them, one name still appeared. Kenneth. He wrote, "Wow, moving on so fast. Guess you're trying to fill the void after destroying true love. Hope he knows what he's getting into." I almost ignored it. Almost. But Daniel saw it first. With calm, measured wit, he typed back, "Thanks for the concern. By the way, congrats on your recent appearance in State Fi Rossi. The transcripts were fascinating." Within an hour, Kenneth's comment was deleted. By morning, his account had blocked us both. I stared at the screen, a small smile tugging at my lips. Not because of the pettiness, but because for once someone else had carried the weight for me. I wasn't alone anymore. The irony was sharp, delicious. Kenneth and Donatella had spent months branding me jealous, bitter, obsessed. And yet in the end, I wasn't the one who couldn't let go. They were. I had my career, my peace, my new beginning. And soon my marriage to a man who understood commitment, not as a trap, but as a choice renewed every day. As I walked out of the courthouse on the final day, papers in my briefcase, sunset bleeding across the sky, I let myself narrate the truth. Quiet, steady, certain. I wasn't jealous. I was free. I was ecstatic because justice had been served, because the truth had survived, and because sometimes the greatest gift betrayal gives you is the chance to start.